In the grim aftermath of the devastating Battle of Stalingrad, where the might of the German army suffered a crippling blow, the world watched with bated breath as the tides of war seemed poised to crush Nazi Germany beneath the weight of Soviet supremacy. Yet, amidst the ashes of defeat, one man emerged as a beacon of hope for the embattled German forces: Field Marshal Erich von Manstein. As the dust settled on the charred remains of Stalingrad, the eyes of the world turned towards the Eastern Front once more, where the fate of nations hung in the balance. It was in this crucible of war, amidst the snow-covered plains and blood-soaked battlegrounds of Kharkov, that von Manstein orchestrated a daring and audacious campaign, defying the odds and resurrecting German fortunes from the brink of collapse. Join us as we delve into the gripping tale of Kharkov 1943, where von Manstein's strategic genius and unwavering determination breathed new life into the German war machine, offering a glimmer of hope in the darkness of defeat. From the ashes of Stalingrad rose a phoenix of military prowess as von Manstein set out to rewrite history and reclaim lost glory for the Third Reich. By January 1943, the once invincible German Wehrmacht found itself in a precarious position, staggering under the relentless onslaught of the Red Army along a vast 175-mile stretch of the Russian front. The recent fall of Stalingrad, claiming the lives of some 600,000 men after a grueling months-long struggle, cast a shadow of despair over German forces. The journey of the Red Army had been nothing short of extraordinary, beginning with the pivotal Battle of Stalingrad and culminating in a relentless advance across two major rivers, covering a staggering 500 miles into the expansive landscapes of the southern Soviet Union. Undoubtedly, it stood as one of the most successful military campaigns in history. Compounding the dire situation, a dual-headed Russian offensive loomed, poised to encircle and obliterate a German battle group of even greater magnitude than the tragic casualties suffered at Stalingrad, dangerously close to their headquarters situated along the Don River. Hitler's assertion to his worried staff during Case Blue, that the Russian is finished, turned out to be nothing more than empty rhetoric. Contrary to his assurances, the Russian forces were far from defeated. Instead, they surged forward with an unstoppable fury. From the Führer's headquarters, a call went out to the man who his fellow officers considered to be the finest commander in the entire Wehrmacht. It was do-or-die season in the East. It was time for Manstein. As the year became 1943, the situation in southern Russia was very unfavorable to the Germans. Beyond the ongoing siege of Stalingrad, Army Group Don, situated to the south of Army Group B, faced significant challenges in repelling the relentless assaults of the Red Army. Compounding the issue was the presence of unreliable Axis allies holding many sections of the front, rendering the entire Axis battlefront vulnerable to disintegration. With insufficient German panzer divisions to stem the tide of the massive Red Army across all fronts simultaneously, they could only be employed as firefighting brigades, hastily deployed to repel incoming attacks at critical points. By early February, the Germans found themselves in a purely defensive stance, prioritizing the slowing down of Soviet armies rather than aiming for decisive victories. Hitler's orders to his generals exacerbated the situation, demanding that they hold their ground at all costs. Fueled by anger over the defeat at Stalingrad, he insisted that every inch of soil be fiercely contested. However, this rigid approach deprived the Germans of one of their most potent strengths, an expert combination of fire and maneuver. Field Marshal Erich von Manstein found himself facing this mess. Manstein, widely regarded as one of the most brilliant strategists and field commanders in the German Wehrmacht, assumed command of Army Group Dawn, later renamed Army Group South, in late November 1942, with the primary objective of rescuing Paulus Sixth Army. Amid the relentless onslaught of Soviet divisions, Manstein's paramount concern shifted to preventing the collapse of the entire German army in Russia. Manstein possessed unparalleled expertise in modern mobile warfare, especially in the effective utilization of tanks. His strategic acumen allowed him to outthink and outmaneuver opponents with the precision of a chess grandmaster, fittingly, as chess was among his passions and obsessions. Manstein's fellow officers hailed him as a master strategist. General Alfred Husinger, from the operations section, held Manstein in high regard, acknowledging his ability to achieve in a single night what might take other military leaders weeks to accomplish. Even before the fall of Stalingrad, the Red Army launched a sweeping offensive into German-held territory, creating a breach spanning 175 miles. Despite the dire situation, Manstein remained composed and resolute, believing he could defeat the Russian attack. However, to execute his strategy effectively, he required Hitler to revoke his hold-at-all-costs directive. Despite Hitler's esteem for Manstein, when the latter proposed large-scale withdrawals to prepare for a counterstroke, Hitler adamantly rejected the idea. Undeterred, Manstein took the extraordinary and perilous step of requesting Hitler's presence at his forward headquarters in Zaporozhye, Ukraine, located less than 50 miles from the main line of contact. After providing Hitler with a comprehensive overview of the dire strategic and tactical challenges ahead, and witnessing the imminent threat posed by the advancing Russian forces, Hitler finally yielded, granting Manstein the autonomy to execute his mission as he deemed necessary. Meanwhile, the relentless pace of the Soviet advance began to take its toll, wearing out their forces over time. As the Soviet forces began to show signs of weariness, Manstein's troops were undergoing a process of consolidation and reinforcement. What were once small groups were now evolving into provisional armies, multi-corps formations led by whoever was available, just as before. Provisional Army Holland now held the position formerly occupied by the Sixth Army, while Provisional Army Frederico took over the territory once held by the Italian Eighth Army. Meanwhile, Provisional Army Lands was in the process of establishing a mobile command centered around Kharkov, which was the fourth largest city in the Soviet Union. Despite lacking in administrative personnel, artillery, and transport, these formations had benefited from months of collaborative efforts, fostering a sense of confidence among the ranks. Additionally, the German renewal was bolstered by the arrival of reinforcements from the home front. The 2nd SS Panzer Corps, consisting of 3 newly formed divisions brimming with fresh manpower, advanced equipment, and unwavering self-confidence. Of paramount importance were the elite units within Manstein's command, including the revered Waffen-SS divisions such as Leibstandarte SS Adolf Hitler, Das Reich, Totenkopf, and Viking, alongside the esteemed Heer Division Großdeutschland. Amidst Soviet overextension and a resurgence of German forces, it was Manstein's time to shine. While he welcomed the reinforcement of the 2nd SS Panzer Corps to his army group, the sheer numerical superiority of the Soviets still outweighed his own forces. In the ensuing days, 1st Panzer Army assumed position on Manstein's left flank. A week later, 4th Panzer Army, led by General Hermann Hoth, joined the line on 1st Panzer Army's left. Under Manstein's leadership, the entire German formation, consolidated and renamed Army Group South, now faced northward, confronting the advancing Soviet armies hurtling towards the Dnieper River crossings. The stakes were immense. If the Soviets reached the Dnieper bridges first, they could potentially ensnare Manstein's entire force on the eastern bank of the river. Having already suffered the loss of an entire army at Stalingrad, the Germans now faced the grim prospect of a super Stalingrad scenario unfolding along their entire southern front, threatening the very outcome of the war. Without delay, the field marshal sprang into action, issuing orders and maneuvering his troops into position for the impending counterattack. Manstein devised a strategic plan, wherein two sizable German forces would maintain their positions on the far left and right flanks, while the troops in the center would stage a tactical withdrawal, seemingly yielding ground to the advancing Russian forces. In addition, he positioned a formidable panzer force poised to launch a counterattack into the flank of the Russians once they reached a predetermined point of advance. Meanwhile, the Russians remained oblivious to the true intent behind Manstein's ordered withdrawals. To them, the movement of German troops appeared to be nothing more than another in a series of retreats that had commenced during the Battle of Stalingrad. Witnessing entire corps and divisions of German and Axis armies fall back in the face of the Red Army's advance, the Russians grew increasingly self-assured and boldly charged into each engagement. This unwavering confidence was precisely what Manstein had anticipated and capitalized on in his strategic calculations. On February 21, 1943, Manstein's Army Detachment Hallet and 1st Panzer Army stood firm against Russian assaults along the Meuse River, northeast of the city of Stalino. Positioned to the northwest, the 4th Panzer Army prepared for the impending counterattack. Meanwhile, the 48th Panzer Corps, comprising 5 panzer divisions, held the other flank of Manstein's strategic design. Continuing their relentless advance, the Russians pressed forward wherever the Germans retreated, as they had been doing for weeks, unknowingly walking into the trap that had been meticulously laid out. To the Russians, the strategy to liberate Ukraine offered the tantalizing prospect of dismantling the core of the German army, and with some fortune, bringing an early end to the war. The Soviet High Command, Stavka, directed an assault into the Kharkov area, where Manstein's forces stood guard, employing 3 primary thrusts along the Voronezh, southwestern, and southern axes. The Voronezh front, comprising the 40th, 69th, and 3rd Tank Armies, was tasked with capturing Kharkov. To the Stavka, this operation represented a pursuit, capitalizing on the perceived German retreat since Stalingrad. By mid-February, the advancing Soviets successfully recaptured Kharkov. Russian intelligence had observed and identified numerous German troop concentrations, which, as Manstein had anticipated, were misinterpreted as preparations for further withdrawals. Consequently, the Russian High Command instructed their troops in the center to push westward, unknowingly falling deeper into the trap set by the Germans. Manstein had banked on the Russians being wholly absorbed in their advance and aimed to cultivate the impression that they were pursuing a demoralized German adversary. Drawing from past encounters, German senior leaders anticipated that the Russians would struggle to adapt to unforeseen shifts on the battlefield. 2 days later, the Soviets were confronted with the stark reality of their miscalculation. On February 21st, Hoff's 4th Panzer Army unleashed a devastating counterattack. 2 coordinated thrusts, one from the south, spearheaded by the 57th Panzer Corps on the left and the 47th Panzer Corps on the right, and another from the northwest led by the 2nd SS Panzer Corps, ambushed the unsuspecting Soviets from multiple directions, catching them completely off guard. German casualties during these initial days were minimal, contrasting sharply with the heavy losses suffered by the Soviets, who saw the near-total destruction of their tank forces and troops. Despite facing a large-scale, coordinated assault by the Germans, the Stavka adamantly refused to acknowledge the situation. Instead, they ordered the 6th Army and the Voronezh Front's 3rd Tank Army to persist in their westward advance. Unprepared for sustained pitched battles, the two Russian armies soon found themselves running low on both fuel and ammunition, essential resources for continuing the fight. In a desperate attempt to provide much-needed supplies to the troops, the Stavka ordered emergency aerial resupply missions. However, the German Luftwaffe, having intercepted and decoded Russian transmissions, lay in wait for the transport planes. As a result, the majority of the aircraft were targeted and destroyed before they could deliver their critically needed cargo to the beleaguered troops below. As the gravity of the situation became undeniable, Russian commanders belatedly ordered the 69th and 3rd Tank Armies to intervene and assist the embattled 6th Army. But their efforts came too late. Depleted of fuel and ammunition, one of the main units of the 6th Army, the 25th Tank Corps, found itself unable to continue the fight. In a state of panic, the troops abandoned their equipment and commenced a disorderly retreat. The consequences of these shortcomings were devastating for the Red Army troops, leading to dire outcomes on the battlefield. As they entered the battle, the counterattacking Germans faced a staggering 8-to-1 manpower disadvantage compared to their Russian adversaries. By March 6th, they had successfully annihilated or captured several large Russian formations within the Kharkov pocket. The toll of the battle was staggering, with the Russians suffering losses of over 80,000 men, 600 tanks, and 1,000 pieces of artillery and field guns. By March 15th, the German army once again claimed control of Kharkov, marking a significant victory in the face of daunting opposition. Manstein had transformed what seemed to be an impending rout by advancing Russian armies into a remarkable victory. In this battle, the Russians' overconfidence and excessive ambition, fueled by previous successes, led them to inadequately prepare for tough fighting and underestimate their opponent. In contrast, the Germans relied on discipline, extensive training, and a sober assessment of the situation. Employing sound strategic and tactical principles, they achieved tremendous success on the battlefield. By the end of March 1943, the immediate danger confronting German forces had been removed. With two German armies pressing northward and the Soviet forces retreating, the opportunity arose to deepen the blow. The climax of the campaign occurred when the 2nd SS Panzer Corps launched a fierce assault on Kharkov. After 3 days of intense street fighting from March 12th to 14th, the city was finally cleared of Soviet forces. Subsequently, German troops advanced less than 50 miles north to Belgorod, capturing the city on March 23rd. However, by this time, the entire front had succumbed to the muddy conditions of the spring thaw, rendering further movement nearly impossible. With the successful counterattack, Manstein realized he had inflicted significant damage on the Soviets. After enduring the tensions of the past month, this moment felt like a liberation for him. Devising a simple yet elegant plan, he orchestrated his strike with impeccable timing and executed it with ruthless precision. In the end, he accomplished what had seemed impossible. He reinstated the German front in the south, where it had been ruptured by the catastrophe of Stalingrad. Even more astonishingly, he restored the front to nearly its position at the outset of the 1942 campaign, before the devastating events of Stalingrad unfolded. Despite Manstein's remarkable victory, it did not mark the end of the conflict. Merely 4 months later, in July 1943, the Wehrmacht embarked on Operation Citadel, an outnumbered and ill-conceived offensive targeting a significant bulge in the Soviet line near the city of Kursk. Hitler's ill-advised decisions at Kursk would lead to a defeat in the summer of 1943, from which the Germans would never fully recover. The German triumph at the Third Battle of Kharkov proved pivotal. Without it, Army Group South faced imminent destruction before summer of 1943, leading to the loss of significant territories in Ukraine to the Soviet Union, and potentially paving the way for Soviet troops to reach Berlin by 1944. Manstein's strategic acumen in this single battle extended the fall of the Eastern Front by a crucial year. Indeed, the Third Battle of Kharkov stands as the last great triumph of the German military in the Eastern Front, its significance impossible to overstate.